The Edith Fox King lecture series began in 1978 when Joe Murray of the Lufkin News told us how he and his staff won a Pulitzer Prize. In 1979, Myron Farber of the New York Times told of his struggle over confidential news sources. In 1980, another Pulitzer Prize winner, David Mitchell of the Point Reyes, California Light, told how that small weekly newspaper won the award also. Last year, Peggy Simpson, a former Sachs student and Washington, D.C. reporter for Hearst newspapers, traced her career in a speech titled From Hondo to Harvard to Hearst. Tonight's distinguished guest speaker was born 33 years ago in Amarillo, Texas, to a newspaper family. He learned the printing trade at 12 and started working for the local daily as a proofrunner at age 14. After receiving a Bachelor of Journalism degree from the University of Texas at Austin in 1970, he worked as a reporter for 5 years, mainly covering the state capitol. He represented the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, the Long News Service, the Austin American Statesman, and United Press International. He started drawing editorial cartoons for the American Statesman in August 1974 and is now distributed nationally by United Feature Syndicate. He is the winner of the Wiki Outstanding Communicator Award of 1981 and is the author of Texas State House Blues, published by Texas Monthly Press in 1980. He has been married for 13 years to wife Kathy, who is also a reporter for the Westlake Picayune, and they have one daughter, Elizabeth, who is almost 2 years old. May I present the winner of the 1981 Pulitzer Prize for Editorial Cartooning, Ben Sargent.
Barbara, thank you for that very nice introduction. I wanted to say first, Ms. King, that it's a great honor to be invited to give this lecture, which is named for you. And I want to congratulate everybody who won all this great stack of awards here too. Y'all did very well indeed, I would say. Stacked up against some stiff competition. I myself have only won 3 awards I can remember. As Barbara said, the Women in Communication chapter in Austin gave me a very nice award last year. I won an honorary convict certificate from some people at the Ellis unit who liked my cartoons about the Ruiz prison suit, and now I've recently won the Pulitzer Prize. It's interesting when you win the Pulitzer Prize, the impression apparently that many people have of it. One is that there are in some quarters who apparently feel it carries with it a great deal of money. I've been getting these letters wanting me to invest in condo projects and things of that nature. If they can use $1,000, maybe I can chip in. It's not true that it carries a lot of money, although it certainly carries a lot of prestige. Another impression that it seems to convey is that it gives the recipient the gift of oratory, which it also does not. I've had a number of nice invitations to speak. I generally have turned them down, except when I can come and talk about editorial cartoons in newspapers, which is that about which I know. I have gotten some other invitations to speak on not just get together and talk about editorial cartoons as we're doing this evening, but come down and capital M, capital S, make a speech, including invitations with assigned topics, which I really shied away from. And another thing that the Pulitzer Prize brought to me were comments from various quarters, as when they called my syndicate chief in New York and wanted to get a comment from him and some other people who spoke of my getting the award as being some kind of a tribute to what I would call the ideological school of editorial cartooning. That may or may not be so. Quite a number of recent Pulitzer winners I would put in that class. Don Wright, Paul Conrad, Paul Zepp. I would count myself in the ideological school of editorial cartoonists, which I would define as editorial cartoonists who regard themselves as editorialists first and cartoonists second, is using cartoons as a medium, much as an editorial writer would use his prose. I think an ideological cartoonist, like any other editorialist, measures political events against some set of political principles or fundamentals that he may hold, and then using the graphic images available to him, makes every day a statement, a definite editorial statement on characterizing what is going on and how he feels about it. Like I said, even though quite a number of recent Pulitzer winners have been in that class, some of them very strong in their in that particular school of cartooning, like Paul Conrad and Don Wright. In sheer numbers, I would say that we're probably a minority among editorial cartoonists today. There's a phenomenon in the trade, which those of us in the trade call the McNelly clones, which is meaning no disrespect to Jeff McNelly, who is a very fine editorial cartoonist, but it refers to cartoonists. John Branch is here, knows of what I'm talking about, who sort of more or less consciously imitate the style of McNelly or say Mike Peters, and who go not for the editorial statement, but for the gag, usually for their first purpose is to be funny ordinarily. The political statement, the political principles that underlie it are usually not readily apparent, or over the course of several cartoons seem kind of fuzzy. I would class that sort of cartoon not so much as an editorial cartoon as more like topical humor. It's what someone I read quoted recently called the visual equivalent of Johnny Carson's monologue. Most developments in the editorial cartooning trade have been a function of technological advances in newspapering. The editorial cartoon first appeared in the mid-19th century when Frank Leslie developed a technique for quickly making woodcuts on boxwood. It became possible to reproduce pictures relatively quickly, say in time for production for a weekly. This was the era of Thomas Nast, who's sort of the spiritual father of all of us American cartoonists. Then the next expansion in the field came with the development of lithography later in the 19th century, and color was added in a little freer drawing style than was possible with the wood block. Later, around the turn of the century, when newspapers began to have photo engraving available to them, came a real explosion in editorial cartoons, because then even a daily paper could have daily cartoons because of the quicker means of reproducing them. The advent of stereotyping made it possible for cartoonists to be syndicated widely, because the maps could be sent to another newspaper, which could then make a cut of the same cartoon. Currently, in editorial cartooning, there's pretty much of a boom in cartoonists. The numbers of cartoonists are growing greatly. Many newspapers which formerly didn't think they could afford cartoonists. Smaller newspapers are getting their own cartoonists. And again, it's probably largely due to offset lithography, which makes it even easier to reproduce pictures in a newspaper without the expense of photo engraving and stereotypography. But I think that I've talked about the technological advances and how they relate to cartooning. I think this phenomenon that we will call McNelly clones, for lack of a better term, also relates to developments in the newspaper business in general, but not so much of a technological nature. And that is a current trend in newspapering, which there's no precise term for it, but I have seen the felicitous term magvid journalism, which is a tendency to shy away from the traditional roles of the newspaper of giving the reader the news. There's more an emphasis on soft news, soft features, visual effects. The intent apparently is to compete with television, which seems odd. A newspaper, I don't think, can compete with television. One evidence of that to me is the physical manifestation of this phenomenon, which is what our editorial writer calls Circus Maximus layout, which involves a great deal of white space, which is useless because it's neither sold to anybody nor conveys any news. I think it's a mistake for newspapers to go too far down this primrose path. I think that newspapers, especially nowadays, tend to follow these trends and then maybe swing back in the other direction. So I don't think this will go on forever, because publishers, like every other executive, have become enamored of consultants, and this current trend is currently what the consultants are telling them that they should do with their newspapers to compete with television, which the consultants say is taking their readers away from them. I think it would be a mistake for newspapers to think that. I think if someone wants to look at television, they'll turn on the television. They won't pick up their newspaper and try to read the television. I think it would be a mistake for newspapers to abandon their traditional role. One quote, which I think I can accurately attribute to Walter Cronkite, was that the peculiar charm of newspapers is news. That it has news in it. It has so much more news than any other medium can deliver, and that is what a reader picks up a newspaper for. I might, to kind of bring it back around to editorial cartooning, I might add to that the dictum of the Chicago Times in 1861, which said that the function of the newspaper was to print the news and raise hell. And I think on the editorial page we're on the aft end of that dictum, and I kind of see a softening on many editorial pages too. On many editorials and editorial pages now, I guess, are what Paul Conrad kind of harshly characterizes as mush. And there seems to be a softening in the taking of strong editorial stands as well, which helps to contribute to editors who want to buy kind of softball editorial cartoons to go with their softball editorials. I think it's really a mistake for the newspaper to abandon its role on the editorial page of raising hell, because I think by doing that they do a disservice not only to the newspaper business, but to the role of the newspaper in our democratic system. I have been asked many times how I see my job. the function of my job, and my usual reply is that it's to make people mad. I would extend that, I think, to the whole newspaper editorial page. If I do an effective cartoon, or if our editorial writer does an effective editorial, I think it will make the reader mad. Either if he agrees with us, he'll get mad at whomever we're mad at, and if not, since there are as many opinions as there are men, there will be some who don't agree with us. Then at least they'll get mad at us. But either way, for however short a time, the reader has become engaged with that issue, and he's become aware of it, and his consciousness has been raised a little bit about the issue at hand. I just lost my way. I think that is a way that the newspaper editorial page can most effectively fit into our system, because the political energy of our system is still out among the people, and if the newspaper can do something to stir up that energy and to keep it vibrant and keep it moving, I think it's performed a very vital service to the American democracy. As I was saying earlier, I am not very gifted with oratory, since drawing is my usual line of work. So probably the most glaring evidence of that is that I have no particular rousing injunction to get you out of this little speech with. So I'll perhaps so I'll just sort of bring it to a close, and I don't know, either if I could get these lights to come down a little or the house lights to come up. I'd like to kind of get it down to, if we still have some time, to get it down to a more or less conversational level, and see if you have any questions about what I do or what cartoonists in general do. Then I'd love to talk to you about it. The question is how much license I have to take a stand in an editorial cartoon. It varies all across the trade, from people who have absolute freedom to draw what they please, to one case of a cartoonist that I had heard of who had to prepare 6 or 7 rough drawings and take them into an editorial board, and they would pass them around and make little changes here, change the wording there, and maybe they would pick one that they finally liked that had been sort of selected by committee, and if not, he had to go back and draw some more. Those would be the two extremes, I would say. My own case is pretty good, I think. I guess every cartoonist would like to have absolute freedom to draw what he pleased. I can pretty well draw what I please, as long as I'm not going just directly 180 degrees counter to the paper's stated editorial policy. To use a metaphor that people who have sailed will understand, that I can sail pretty close into the wind but not directly upwind. So far, no issue in which I've been just head-to-head with the paper has been really a vital enough issue for me to have any pangs of conscience about just remaining silent about it. So I guess I have pretty much editorial freedom, and like most editorial cartoonists, I'm sure, work, the ideas are all mine, the political opinions expressed are all mine, and I really think that that's the only way that the medium can work, is for one person to conceive and execute the whole thing. It seems to be sort of a one-man kind of project.
Did you win the Pulitzer for a series of cartoons or one single cartoon?
The Pulitzer for editorial cartooning is theoretically given for your whole body of work through a year, in this case 1981. What the Pulitzer jury is actually looking at is 10 cartoons, which is the maximum that you can send in with your entry. So really they judge by a group of 10 cartoons that you've sent in. In years past, they have always selected one of those 10 to cite to the Pulitzer board at Columbia as being representative of this cartoonist's work, and then that's the one you see on the wire and in the stories and everything. This year, the one that the jury liked the best was one that was making fun of the Janet Cook imbroglio, and they were afraid that if they sent that one up to the Pulitzer board would think they were twitting them about the Janet Cook affair, and so they just recommended all 10 without citing one particular one. So that is how it's done.
When you were a reporter for 5 years, were you looking forward to long ago be a cartoonist, reporting in the background?
No, I have been drawing all my life, I guess, but I just sort of fell into doing editorial cartoons. I never had thought of it as a career possibility until one day I was doing it. When I worked for the American Statesman as a reporter, this would have been about 10 or 11 years ago now, I started doing illustration type drawings on the side, feature illustrations, that sort of thing. I left, went elsewhere and worked as a reporter, but after a couple of years, the Statesman came back and asked if I wanted to come over there full time. So with some trepidation, I went over there and was supposed to start doing illustrations and little maps and graphs and things of that order. And pretty soon after I got there, I started doing editorial cartoons, just sort of on my own initiative. And now that has just sort of grown to where that's all that I do now. So I sort of backed into it.
92.9 is KIT.
Pretty much all day, I guess. I guess anywhere from 3 to 5 hours of actual drawing time. How far ahead of time I work is not very far. I'm working on the next morning's cartoon each day, which is probably the only kind of a deadline situation where I would ever get any work done. I don't know how y'all are, but I pretty much have to be under the gun to get anything done. I guess I just generate my ideas sort of the same place everybody else does, but an editorial cartoonist has the particular advantage of having politics to draw on for his inspiration, which is a never-ending source, and particularly if he's in Texas. And it's just a matter of reading as much as you have time for, newspapers and magazines, TV, and just sort of learning to observe and gauge your own responses to the news, and just a lot of times just having bull sessions with the other people on the editorial page staff will sort of produce ideas. If I knew exactly how the process worked, I'd just come in there every day and do it. But as it is, I'm usually coming in every day in utter terror because I don't have an idea, and I just do what I can to get one.
Do you ever regret a cartoon that's published, one that's already come out, and look back on it and say,
Yeah.
should have been different? I hadn't done that.
I guess I may regret the cartoon in maybe one of two ways. One would be if I didn't get an idea until 4:30 in the afternoon and the drawing is a little rough and a little less finished than I would like. I'd regret that. The other might be in a situation where a cartoon would sort of predict something, like say that a certain candidate is a sure winner, or a certain piece of legislation will pass, and then it doesn't happen. I guess I regret those in a way because it publicly showing up my political astuteness. But I don't think, such as it is, I don't think I have ever done one where I regretted what I said about the issue. I don't know, maybe it just comes from being very opinionated. I guess the favorite target of all American cartoonists in recent times has been Richard Nixon. He's so easy in more than one sense. And you'll notice that every time Nixon makes any kind of a peep into the news, that every cartoonist in the country will leap on it. And I wish I could show to you a wonderful Don Wright cartoon that when Nixon first sort of reappeared from his hibernation, or whatever you would want to call it, and he showed a cartoonist at his drawing board, and he was looking at the paper and he was saying, "Poor old Richard Nixon, I'm tempted to do another cartoon on this poor old, defeated hulk of an individual, but I don't know, maybe I should just leave him alone for a while." And this is going through several panels, and his hand starts to rise from the board. He's saying, "Why should I pick on this man who's been hounded from office, and what's that hand doing?" And then it's sort of like Dr. Strangelove. He's saying, "Stop, hand!" And then the last panel, he's evilly grinning and drawing this caricature of Nixon, and that's kind of how it is. Other than that shining example, I would say that the answer to that is that a cartoonist's agenda is sort of set for him by events. When you can only make 5 editorial statements a week, you generally have to pick and choose from the most important stories. And so naturally, the people that you draw the most are going to be sort of determined for you. They're going to be the president, the governor, the Secretary of State, the most prominent figures. And I think that at least for me, I enjoy drawing the most people who I draw the most. The people I do most often, because the first time you do a caricature of someone, you're just trying to make it look like them, and even then you may wind up having to label them, And then the second time it becomes a little easier, and after a while of doing a person several times, you can begin to work with that caricature and kind of play with their features and use it more to express what you're trying to say in the cartoon. And that's when doing a caricature becomes more enjoyable. So I guess the answer would be the people I do the most. Like currently, it naturally would be President Reagan, Governor Clements, Al Haig, people like that. I deal. Well, because of my syndication obligations, I have to do 4 a week on national subjects, and that leaves 1 a week that I usually reserve for Texas subjects, and just because of the time consideration there, I haven't done any local ones. But God knows I would like to. I know that, like here, I know that the only local politics which is stranger and more bizarre than Austin politics is Bexar County politics, and this would certainly be a rich field for a cartoonist. But I think local issues would lend themselves well to cartoons, and because the mechanics of the human element of politics is the same whether it's in the courthouse or on the international front. It's so the kinds of things that people do and the mistakes they make, the things they say are basically the same kinds of things, and you can do the same kinds of comments about them. In fact, I think that the closer to home a cartoon is, the more effect it can have. If anybody can cite instances where cartoons have actually caused something to happen, which I think is a fairly rare phenomenon, where you can say cartoon A caused event B, they have been on the local level. The only instance I can think of is of course the most famous historical instance of the fall of the Tweed Ring in New York City, largely as a result of the furor stirred up by Thomas Nast cartoons about them. But I think just from the immediacy of it and the fact that it's the paper right there can give local cartoons a great deal of impact. I know that in my own experience that very often my state cartoons will have a lot more immediate impact than other ones. You know, there's 200 guys doing cartoons on what Reagan said today, but only one person in the state capitol who's making some comment on what Clements said today, and knowing that the people involved will see it the next morning. So the answer is yes.
Do your cartoons get passed through legal counsel?
No, you think they should?
Well, I read recently that editorial cartoonists can, quote, get away with more, unquote, than editorial writers, and I was just wondering if that becomes a problem.
It hasn't become a problem, and in fact, until recently, there were no instances of libel suits being filed against in the United States for cartoons. Recently, like the last 3 or 4 years, there have been several filed. The most recent was the governor of Massachusetts who sued Paul Zepp of the Boston Globe for allegedly libeling him in cartoons. But none of the cases have come to trial, and so it's hard to say how the cases based on cartoons would compare with the cases based on written material. That may be the reason for the difference, is that there is a large body of case law on written material and none on cartoons. My own legal opinion, Chet, would be that I would think that editorial cartoons would almost always fall well within the bounds of fair comment, because they, like I say, they do have to deal with the most important figures and most important issues and things that fall way within the bounds of the legal doctrine of fair comment, of comments that are strictly on criticisms of public policy issues and not criticisms of individuals and personalities, and so therefore are privileged from libel by the First Amendment. It would be difficult, I think, for a cartoonist to libel someone. He would have to really set out to slander them.
In your local cartooning, do you prefer to get to know the people that you're drawing, or not in Austria, not to be around all those people? Or you
Right.
say
I guess I prefer to at least keep a distance from them. I do know a lot of the politicians in Austin, just mainly because of my own political activity and because of having been a reporter at the state capitol for a number of years. I really think it's better for a cartoonist to keep his distance. And I know Patrick Oliphant of the late Washington Star, who now is just operating more or less independently, if he met a politician on the street, would cross to the other side. He has an absolute rule that he doesn't want to see him, talk to him, and I think that the principle behind that is sound. That you wouldn't want to become friends with someone whose policies you might down the road have to criticize, both for your own conscience and just from the standpoint of leaving yourself open to criticism, that Sargent wouldn't criticize so-and-so because they're pals, you know. So I think it's probably better to keep a distance.
No mention of rain in the forecast. All right. Low tonight about 56 degrees. Tomorrow mostly sunny with a high about 78. Currently 70 degrees at 92.9.
Elections, and I didn't get to see papers. I didn't know about it until about a week later. I wondered, did anybody do any cartoons on that? Did they just let it fall?
Oh, I wasn't about to let that one fall. The only ones I saw, Bob Taylor of the Dallas Times-Herald had one as you recall, Mr. Brown blamed this gaffe on a bad turkey sandwich in Laredo, which was ironic after all of Brown's radio ads about he had made all the food of Texas pure and free of contamination. But it happened on the Thursday before the election, and the policy of in written editorials on our paper is not to write anything on the election the day before or on the day of the election, just because of the idea that we want to allow, if we write something about a candidate, we want to allow him to respond. And so I decided that there was really too little time to do something on it before the election. But as soon as that election was over, took pen in hand, and I did one too. It depicted Brown walking off dejectedly, dragging a Reagan Brown for Ag Commissioner sign behind him, and he was musing to himself. If I can recall this. What went wrong? Did we lose the urban vote or the labor vote? Did we lose the Mexican-American vote or the Thank you very much.